As the open's getting ready to start.
Program has been paid for by your weekly checkup.
It's 9 o'clock. And the WMUZ Life and Finance team is on the air. To make sure we're all headed in the right direction, we at WMUZ have assembled a team of experts. And every night, a different expert is here to give advice about the issues that impact your life.
We hope you find the information on today's program to be inspiring. If you've been told you have to live with pain or a chronic health problem, we encourage you to call 866-521-WELL and make an appointment with Dr. Lazar, the host of your weekly checkup. Dr. Jonathan Lazar is an upper cervical doctor who believes you can live the life God intended for you. The number again is 866-521-WELL. That's 866-521-WELL.
Hey, Mike's up right now.
Welcome to your weekly checkup. I'm Dr. Lazar, and we are excited to be with you live tonight. Jaden is in studio. Jaden, glad to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
You've been off a little bit lately. You've been partying, I think. Don't know exactly that that's an accurate statement, but we've missed having you on here. Although I did hear from some people who will remain nameless that came into the office and said that they really enjoyed the shows a lot that you happened to not be on. I don't know if that was
bribing patients doesn't count as accurate feedback.
All I'm saying is what I was told, and it was good. So decluttering is big. You know, it's the end of the year and our minds can be really busy. And there's a lot to be said about chaos and disorganization and how that can impact our nervous system. And then ultimately, because the nervous system controls so much, our health. And so there's a big connection between physical clutter, you know, the way your desk looks and car looks and bedroom looks and closet looks, between mental chaos and between nervous system dysfunction. And so we're going to be talking about that tonight. And it's a really cool topic because it's relevant to all of us. There's nobody listening that this would not apply to. That sounded like a really weird way to say that. Everybody listening
this
can
would
relate
apply
to this.
to everyone.
That is a much cleaner way to say it. So we have a special guest tonight. His name is Shawn Lemon, and he is the founder of the Digital Organizer. Now, I'm a total nerd. I geek out on this stuff. So to find out there's something called a digital organizer automatically has my attention. I'm an early adopter. I like to check things out. I like to tinker. And so this was very interesting to me to find out that there's something called the Digital Organizer. And he has an entire approach on simplifying life through digital decluttering and organization. You guys are in for a really, really big treat, because how many of you have an iCloud account and a Dropbox account and a Google Workspace account, and Teams is for chat. That's not, but Microsoft has like 365, Office 365 or something, or OneDrive. That's what it's called. You can have Microsoft OneDrive, and you can have Evernote, and you can have all these different accounts and digital places to store things and whatever. But it doesn't necessarily mean we're organized. And I personally have been excited about this because I know how much time I spend, you know, is that in the cloud, or is that in my documents folder, or is that on the server, or is that, and so chaos, disorganization, complication of systems, a huge tech stack, all of those things can affect health. They do affect health, particularly the nervous system. And so there are going to be some tips we're going to talk about, and it's going to be a really great show. And our prayer is always that everyone tuning in is listening because you're supposed to listen, because you're supposed to be here. So if you're listening, welcome. It's not an accident that you're here. And I'm really excited to welcome Shawn Lemon of the Digital Organizer. So Shawn, welcome to your weekly checkup.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Lazar
Absolutely.
and Jaden.
Of course.
So I would love for our listeners to hear how in the world, how did your life end up with you having a digital organizer system?
Yeah, well, it started with my dad really making sure that I knew how to use all this stuff in the first place. When I was growing up, we had dial-up, and and it stopped working all the time because Windows would do an update and then it would break everything. We had to do these driver rollbacks and all kinds of stuff. He got tired of that and made sure that I knew how to do it. And then he was also technically minded, and I inherited some of that. So once I first got my a new Mac, I was always a PC guy. I finally got one. I just tore into it. I was so excited about it, and eventually that led me to working at the Apple Store. And then at the Apple Store, because I'm a teacher at heart, they put me in the position called creative, which means that we would teach people how to use their new Macs. And people would be so excited about getting this brand new machine and ready for a fresh start. And they would have the Genius Bar transfer all of their data from one machine to another. And then, that saying, no matter where you go, there you are. Well, their mess just got transferred. And I had people sitting there paralyzed, wanting to do all of this new stuff. They're so excited about their computer. And then it all came to a crashing halt because they didn't know how to deal with all of this and in a brand new environment. And they got really locked up. And people just started asking me over the years. I did that for 7 years, and they'd ask me to come to their house and help them do that. And the Apple Store didn't fill that need. So I was able to do it, and eventually decided, I'm going to start my own business doing this, and going in businesses and people's homes to help them get on top of their digital clutter so that they can use the stuff that they bought for the reasons that they bought it for, to make those videos, to make the photo books, and to communicate with their friends and family and stuff like that.
That's really, really cool. So with the idea that what was happening with these people? So they would get a new device. I mean, I see people in the Apple Store all the time. They just don't know their password or whatever. But yeah. So I mean, what happened from I'm excited, it's Christmas in July, I'm opening this beautiful new packaging, to oh crap.
Yeah. Okay, let's take photos, for example. Now, I don't do photos, but this is a great example of how it was then, and the problem that we still see now with email and files and stuff like that. And we'll get into files in a little bit. But the cloud, Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drive, all that stuff didn't exist when I was doing this. So photos is a perfect example because, for me, I had all of my photos stored by years, in folders for years and in months, and then I would have different folders for all of my photos. So when the Genius Bar is going to do your data transfer to you, they take that whole set of photos and they would dump it into iPhoto. And iPhoto is an application that has all kinds of really cool stuff that you can do to organize your photos. So they would have these things called events, and that's like the original, where all of your originals are. And then you could create albums. And albums are like playlists. You might want the same photo in 5 different albums because it's your favorite pet photos, it's your favorite family photos, a vacation as well. And that photo happens to meet 3 different criteria. So you could organize it in different albums. But this is totally a brand new concept for people that didn't understand that at all. They're used to files and folders. You can't have a photo in more than one place, so you have to make copies of it. So when all of a sudden they had this system that they understood, a folder structure that they loosely held and could generally find what they were looking for, and then it got dumped into a brand new system and they didn't know how to use that, it was just total shutdown. And then if it was really messed up before they had the transfer and then it got pulled into photos, they not only had to organize what was a mess before, but they had to learn the software at the same time. And that's kind of where we're at right now, is that you rattled off a ton of stuff: OneDrive, Google Drive, Evernote. We could throw in Notion and ClickUp. There's tons of tools out there that are available to us that are marketed in a way that they're very easy to use. And they can be if you learn how to use it and have a framework of how you're supposed to do it. And so helping to translate that was really my specialty, and yeah, how I got here.
That's a really interesting, idea, because there's the neuropsychology behind chaos. Like we can talk about there being, photos being simple, or iCloud storage being simple, or Dropbox being simple, or whatever they are. Notion is like taking the world by storm, or whatever. But the idea ultimately, as we scale all the way down to like the deepest level, our autonomic nervous system has the fight or flight, the gas, or the rest and digest, and the break. And when we're dealing with chaos, that will trigger a chronic sympathetic activation, which leads to a big stress response. And we are designed to run from a bear for 10 minutes, but not 10 years, not 20 years. And so the idea of, what this is actually doing, like, we can watch Marie Kondo and say, oh, that's wonderful, their closet is beautifully organized, but it literally affects our health. It affects how we respond to life. And Jaden, we were actually talking earlier about the brain structures, about the prefrontal cortex and decision making. And you commented on what clutter does, like clutter in our life, digital or analog. I don't know. Is analog the opposite of physical? Yeah.
Physical.
But what we were talking about, what clutter does to decision making in our prefrontal cortex.
It actually, like with the role that it plays with decision making, it reduces its efficiency.
Right. Literally, clutter, digital or physical, messes with your neuro efficiency.
And then with the amygdala as well, the role that it plays within processing stress signals from disorganization.
Yeah, it's stressful on your brain when things are not organized, when things are chaotic. So there are a lot of studies linking physical clutter to increase cortisol levels, which put belly fat on, make us not think as well, help us feel more anxiety. And so we know that with physical clutter. But Shawn, how would digital overload mirror those effects of physical disorganization? Is it the same way when it's digital?
Absolutely. I often ask people, if your digital workspace, say your computer, your emails, your desktop, your downloads folders, the different places that you actually work off of in your computer, if you were to convert that, wave a magic wand, into a physical space, what would that look like? Would you tolerate that in your physical space? And the majority is, people would say, no, it would be an absolute train wreck. And it would be like this, basically a bunch of portable units all like smashed together and using all kinds of stuff to store, or places to store things. And it's crazy. I mean, the amount of triggers that we are exposed to every time we open up our email or open up your web browser and you've got 80 different tabs open, what those are doing is every time you see a different stimulus, it is lighting up a different neural network. And there's this book called Your Brain at Work, which is really great at taking brain science and distilling it down into something really tangible with a great example of how it works. But it talk about every time you expose yourself to something else, like a different email. So say 3 different emails, you've just brought 3 different characters on the stage. And if you're trying to watch and pay attention to what's happening on a stage, the more characters you bring up and the more things that are happening, how hard is it to focus on the thing that you're actually supposed to focus on? It's extremely difficult. And you're having to say no to all of these things that are vying for your attention. No, I'm not going to buy that. No, I'm not going to open that right now. No, I can't respond to this because I have to do this. The more things that we have open, and I think it's actually even worse than physical, the more that those things are open, the more brain power is just being drained away from you, and also willpower, which we only have so much of every day as well. So I think it's worse actually than physical clutter.
So how does that play into our mental clutter? So like, I have a mental list of all the things I have to do today because I didn't put it in Asana or my full focus planner, and I have to think through that. And then people are asking questions, and in our world, patients are asking questions, and so those aren't like, I'll be with you in a minute. Like we got to be on those. So we already have mental clutter, and now we have this digital disorganization. And so how does that mirror, I guess I don't want to set it up that way. Does that mirror mental clutter? Does it exacerbate mental clutter? Is it the chicken or the egg? Like, how do those hang out?
All I can say is that it certainly adds to it. The more we're trying to juggle in the first place, the harder it is to just focus. And with so many people having ADHD or ADHD-like symptoms because of dopamine deficiency from all the different notifications, it just makes it harder. So if you're trying to remember all of these different things, and then you just quickly look at your emails and you see all of these requests from other people and a sale from a company that you love to shop from, then it just adds it and makes it even worse. And then you just start the balls start falling that you're juggling, and you just can't keep it all up. So yeah, definitely makes it worse.
That's a good explanation. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to Your Weekly Checkup. I'm Dr. Lazar. Jaden is in studio with us, and we are excited to have our special guest with us, Shawn Lemon, and he is with digitalorganizer.com. Is that the right website? Is it?
TheDigitalOrganizer.com.
The Digital Organizer. We will fix that for sure. Anyway, Jaden, you were mentioning about some examples that you were going to ask, so I'll let you do that.
Yes. So do you have specific examples of stress from like excessive notifications, disorganized files, or you mentioned email overload? Do you have specific examples that would lead to stress?
Totally. I mean, so many people come to us because they're overloaded with email in the first place, but there are a lot of people who don't. It's their files are out of control, or their passwords are just a complete nightmare, and they're trying to work with someone else to help them with things, and they can't get in, can't get their password straightened out, or can't get someone else in there because of two-step verification issues. So there's all kinds of reasons people come to us. And when it's not email, and we see 13,000 emails in the inbox, 5,000 of them unread. It's like, hey, have you thought about tackling that? Oh, no, it doesn't bother me. I've just learned to ignore it. Like all the things that I need to take care of, I mark it as unread, and it's fine. I can search for what I'm looking for. And if we push a little bit and say, can I just take you through it? Can we do this together? And they let us, and we get to inbox zero. Say, okay, you're at inbox zero. We talk through how to stay on top of it, how to triage your emails so that you really don't have to answer everything right away. That's a big common misconception about inbox zero, is that you're answering every email. You're not. But after the fact, every time in the follow-up session, or I'll get an email or a phone call and say, and I'll hear, I had no idea how stressed out my email was making me until it was gone. And these were people who swore up and down that it wasn't affecting them. Just knowing that there are all of these things that potentially could have your attention, and those loops are probably closed. If somebody needs me, they'll hit me up again. Just having that there, it's taking a massive toll on your unconscious, and you don't even realize it yet. So that one's really, really easy. And we get a lot of reports back just as far as like the files goes, knowing exactly where to find a file, and not dealing with the duplicates and not having to hunt for files every time they're looking for things, and it can take off their Sherlock Holmes hat. It makes a really big difference. I love getting reports a year or 2 years later of just talking about how much more peaceful their lives are.
That's really cool.
That's cool. One thing you mentioned is they said that they didn't even realize it. They were stressed out about it. And we hear that a lot in the office. When we show patients their nerve scans or their x-rays, they'll say either, it's very common that they'll say, oh, I forgot about that. That was a while ago. Or once they've started care and they've received a couple adjustments and they're starting to feel better. So our goal, we always tell patients, we want you to feel better, but that's not our end goal. Our end goal is to make sure that your body is working at its full God-given potential where it's supposed to be functioning. And so it's great if you're feeling better, but that's not our end goal. And most patients will come in and we'll say, oh, how's your shoulder feeling? Weren't able to move it last week. And they're like, oh, I forgot about it, actually. My shoulder's fine. It's good. I can move it. I didn't even realize that. So that's what I thought of when you brought about the
Isn't
emails.
it so funny how we can normalize pain so quickly? And then we can also forget about the pain so quickly as well. And that's one of the things with the digital disorganization and just the chaos that all of us are experiencing in our inboxes every time we open them up. I mean, marketers have just completely taken over, especially if you're a business owner. The amount of cold emails we're getting, of like cold emails, meaning somebody's pitching us their services, a new website or something like that. It's just insane because of AI now making this stuff so easy. But it's just ubiquitous. Everyone is experiencing the overwhelm, and everyone's getting all this stuff. And so it just feels normal. And so a lot of people, most people aren't really looking for a solution. So you didn't even realize that a digital organizer existed until I came out and said, hey, what do you think about this for a show? And yet everyone you know could use our help. But not everyone is really willing to pay for it or do anything about it because it's become so normalized. And that's the thing that feels like such a shame right now, for me, is seeing, the effects of the stuff on our kids, the effects that it's having on adults, on our parents and grandparents of the technology is really affecting us in a negative way in a lot of areas. It's enhancing, but we also need to become aware of how it's affecting us negatively as well and do something about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you're just tuning in, this is your weekly checkup. I'm Dr. Lazar. Jaden's in studio tonight, and we have Shawn Lemon from thedigitalorganizer.com. We're talking about how clutter and chaos mess with our nervous system and ultimately then our health. Of course, our productivity. We believe that the world deserves you at your best, and that you're here for a reason, and that living out your full God-given potential is the only acceptable way to do things. Not from a place of judgment or a sanctimonious approach, but from an encouraging, hey, we know there's more. We can always raise our hand a little higher. We can always serve a little bigger. That sort of thing. So we're talking with Shawn about digital decluttering, and I want to talk about some actionable tips to reclaim that peace. Dave Ramsey talks about financial peace. It's pretty big, and it's interesting too, Shawn, you were mentioning that we didn't know we needed it. And I've shared my story so many times because it's why we do what we do. And I share with people that I was on 9 prescription medications by the time I left for college. And it wasn't until several years later that I was in chiropractic school and had the pressure taken off my brainstem that over the course of the next year, I was able to get off all 9 of those prescription medications. And I wasn't looking for a solution. It's exactly what you just said. Different context, but really same idea is I didn't know there was a solution. I didn't know there was a problem. I mean, I just thought you're sick or you're healthy. It's the luck of the draw. It's in the genes. You know, I have to take more medication, have more surgeries than other people. And it's dark outside. I mean, I didn't even think that there was, so I wasn't looking for a solution. I just happened to, you know, get relief and healing and correction. And instead of covering up the symptoms and letting my problems get worse, which is what we unfortunately knowingly do as a society when we're just treating symptoms, the same approach, I am glad you brought it up how you did, because we know that something's up, but we're not quite sure. I mean, there's a reason kids can't gamble until 21 because of what it does to their brain. Yet, you know, we'll see 6-month-olds on tablets now and letting that blue light do all the stuff it's going to do to their brains and things. And so what are some tips you have for digital decluttering? You mentioned Inbox Zero. We'd be interested in file organization hacks, anything for like streamlining calendars, whatever it is you have that like that people should be paying attention to.
Yeah. Well, I think probably one of the quickest wins that you can employ right now is going into your phone and into your computer and starting to turn off notifications and be ruthless about it. That's the dopamine hits you're getting over and over again from those little dings that are pulling you into your technology to where you are compulsively checking over and over again. That's taking a serious toll. Excuse me. It's taking a serious toll on your nervous system. And so if we can stop this endless dinging and this endless notification of trying to vie for your attention, you're going to find a lot more peace right away and a lot more mental capacity and capacity to just be present with those around you. So start rolling back those notifications and turning them off. You know, you can schedule times. You can say, I'm going to check my email at 9. I'm going to check my email at 11. You can choose to check your email at the top of the hour if you want to. Do you really need to respond to someone the second an email arrives? Do you even do it anyway? Do we need to have this on? I'd love to challenge you to say, just try and turn them all off for a week and see what happens. So that's extremely easy, and we haven't even got into anything technical yet.
It's interesting you brought up the notifications. I don't have the statistics with me, but Dr. Lazar, do you remember there was just recently an experiment that they did at a school, and they said I think it was within the time of one class, for a student, every time you get a ding or a notification on your phone, to come put a tally on the whiteboard. And they had Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. They had tons of like different categories. And by the end of 1 hour, because they were saying every ding you get, your brain goes there and you get interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end of by the end of the class, I think they had over 100 alerts.
I know
What
which
were
one
the
you're talking
numbers?
about. I think it was 450 something.
Something like that.
It was insane in a 50-minute class.
And they were saying like they're no wonder kids are so distracted and not able to focus if that's what's happening.
You know, if you've got kids, it doesn't matter what age. If their brain is mentally developing, one of the best things that you can do for them and for yourself is to read The Anxious Generation.
The Anxious Generation. Okay.
The ancient generation. Yeah, I'll let you go and check it out. It kind of hit the podcast world by storm. They've done a ton of interviews on it. I read the book. A bunch of my family and friends, I'm constantly recommending it. But it just kind of gets into the science behind notifications, social media, gaming, and some stuff like that, and what it's doing to kids' brains. It's an uncontrolled substance.
Sure.
Um,
Exactly.
and I don't think that we have to halt the use of technology at all, um, but technology and the big companies, Facebook, social media, gaming. I mean, even Apple, Google, all of them, they're being incredibly irresponsible with our kids, and really everyone who's using their stuff. I'd love to see a lot more restrictions being put on what can be used and what's actually age appropriate, because
Yeah.
it's the science is finally coming around. We've had enough time to study the effects of these phones in our hands to see that we've got to get control of this, because it's messing with our heads.
It is. We had a group on Protect Young Eyes. We had on a while ago, and that was, obviously a little bit of a different approach, but same idea of, when we were kids, you had to, for inappropriate material, you had to like go into your friend's dad's room and look under the bed. Like you'd have to try to find it. And with the pornography that's available to kids with what's in their pocket, that would be like on your coffee table of having 4 magazines there, one of them being a pornographic magazine that you just walk by and sit down and look at. I mean, it's that crazy. Jaden, that study you were
doing it.
I know. Yeah, like that's even scarier. In the 40-minute class, I found the one that you were talking about. I was wrong as well. There were 662 notifications that interrupted a 40-minute class. There were 485 text messages, 123 social media notifications, and 54 other notifications for 662 in a 40-minute class.
Imagine what's happening when they're not in class.
Right.
And they're allowed to use it.
That's big. So, not Hal Elrod, who wrote Deep Work? Cal Newport.
Oh, Cal Newport.
Yeah, listening to you talk about that, I was, that was very helpful for me to think about. Yeah, I don't need my Slack on all the time. I'm not going to get any. I mean, I think his book's called Deep Work, at least that one, and it reminded me of that when you were saying that. So let's hear more about what it is that how you can help people. So there are things we can do on our own. And then there are, like, I don't do my own taxes. There are people that are better at me than doing that. And I heavily judge people who crack their own neck. We shouldn't do that either. You should leave it to the pros. In fact, we don't crack necks either. Ours is a little different, but, so you're generous with your tips. You have an assessment on your website, thedigitalorganizer.com. How can you help? And I say, I believe that life is better with a guide. So if you've been there and done that, how can you help people, or how can your organization help people that say, hey, this might be worth looking into?
Yeah, so we focus on 4 primary areas that absolutely everyone deals with. That's email organization. So if you got an incoming tide of emails, you're having a hard time keeping up with it, we can help with that. File organization. So you nailed it earlier. When we've got iCloud, Dropbox, Google Drive, usually multiple Google Drive accounts, OneDrive, so many different cloud accounts, plus our internal computer. Where do we store everything? We're having to, play Sherlock Holmes to find things all the time. We need to create one source of truth. And we need to have a place to store all of our tasks and the projects that we're working on, whether we're dealing with a team or we're just dealing with our own household and keeping that in order. We've got tasks that we need to keep track of because we got a lot we want to do. And because technology makes things so easy to get things done, we're just piling more and more onto our plate. So how do we do that well and consciously and realize what we're doing so maybe we don't pile it up so high? And then lastly is passwords. Everyone's dealing with password nightmares. You know, you can't use fluffy 123 anymore for everything. Sometimes you have a star. Sometimes you can't use a star. You've got to use an exclamation. You can't use any special characters at all. Or we want you to put a space in there. You know, there's so many different rules to keeping track of passwords, and really you shouldn't be using the same password anyway. So those are the four primary areas. We used to do photos, not so much anymore. I'll refer you to somebody else. Blue Water Imaging is a good person to turn to if you're Mac based for that. But yeah, those four things, because the three of them, email, or we could just say communication, files, where we're storing things, and keeping track of tasks, are the three things that are constantly feeding into each other. We get an email and say, hey, can you do this? Well, if we can't do it right away, maybe it needs to go into our task manager. Or hey, we sent you this contract. We need you to sign it and send it back. Well, you should download that contract and save it somewhere that you can find it later. And it shouldn't be in your email. Email's for communication. It's not for filing things. So we need to download that somewhere. But then we might be collaborating on a paper that we're writing together. Maybe we're both in class and we're working on a project together. So sending versions of files back and forth all the time, that doesn't make sense when we've got cloud stuff. So what we should be doing is saving everything in the cloud so that we can send a link to our friends so that we're working off of the same document. And we're not having to deal with the version issues. And if we're also doing project management, we could do the same thing. We could put a link anywhere you're communicating, anywhere you're keeping track of tasks, so that we're working off of the same files. And we get to do that when we've consolidated everything and created a single home for your files. So this way, communication is just for communication. Email, you're just talking to people. You may be sending something, you may be receiving it, you deal with it, you archive it and get it out of there. And then tasks, you know, there's a home for that, and then your files have a home.
So some personal pain points. This is really interesting hearing this because my Colby is a 3195, and so one follow through for those of you not familiar would be, I will change stuff up just because doing it the same way twice sounds horrible, you know? And then 9 quick action means I will face a problem and I will immediately think there's got to be an app for that. And I'll go find the app and I'll do the free trial. And then I'll forget that I did the free trial. And then, you know, my wife is our CFO, and sometimes she has the wife and CFO hat on that says, the heck is this? And our software stack, it has at its height been approximately 72 line items on a budget. No exaggeration. Like, I caught so much heat for that. Like, what is all this? And I'm like, well, I think that does the, and I think that solved one problem. And I think that, and so I paint myself into a corner, and my team loves it because, you know, we're always like, no, that's that software, or it's so interesting. So I know, I feel the pain of, and we're fairly organized. That's the other thing that's weird. Like, we're relatively organized and still spend time looking for stuff, ask each other where stuff is. Yeah, it's just, it's really interesting to see how big of a challenge this is. And I'll tell you, having people on my team that are remote, so finance people remote, my EA, she's in office 1 day a week, but the rest of the week she's remote. If I have to do one more 2-factor authentication on a cell phone that somebody needs at a certain time, when I'm just like, this is insane. It is insane how much of my life putting pillows back on the bed takes and doing multi-factor authentication.
My Kobe is the opposite of yours, because I like to sit on it and think for a while of all the possible opportunities or things. So I don't like to do the free trials. I like to just pick my one. Yeah, I'm the opposite.
Here's one for you, Shawn. What about the person that has the MacBook Pro and the Mac Mini, and work requires Windows, so they've got the Surface and they've got the iPad Pro and they've got the Remarkable because the marketing worked? What serious question, asking for a friend. What do you say to that person?
What's the problem said person might be facing?
Well, hypothetically speaking, it's which piece of hardware to use in what context, like did we write that on Remarkable, or is that in GoodNotes, or crap, was that on the Surface in OneNote? Like where did that one go? I've heard, again, I don't know if this is an actual thing.
He's speaking
Of
from
course.
experience.
So you have to use less tools. Now you can have a bunch of different gear, but we have to decide where we're going to store things and where the primary place is. You can experiment all you want, but the home has to be one place in particular until you fully commit somewhere else. So say we use Asana for project management, we use Google Docs for our file storage, and then we've got our email accounts and such. If you want to spin up Hive and try that instead of Asana, well, great. What are we going to isolate to be our test case to see how we like it, so we can play and have variety in our lives? Now, the rest of the team is going to stay on Asana because we need to create an anchor and we need to create stability in our group that everyone can rely on. But we can have a small cohort of people who really enjoy testing out new things. And we may need a critic on that team as well who doesn't like change thrown in there as well, just for the fun of it, or really the stability. And have that person in there. And we really isolate and say, what are we going to put in here? What are we going to really add in to fully test the features that we really want? Is it worth the switch? Because switching a platform is a lot of work. So commit to one and then play in isolated instances, other places, have a time limit on it. And then at the end of that time limit, have a review, an after action review to see how did it work. So that's how I address people who really want a lot of different tools. But overall, I think you can have Remarkable, you can have the iPad Pro, you can have a lot of different tools, but you need to pick one platform to be the consistent account that you're signing in everywhere. That's the home for stuff. So I love having an iPad and an iPhone and my Mac, and I used to have additional Macs as well that I would flip back and forth between. I had MacBook Air and then an iMac here, and now I just have everything. My laptop I plug into a whole workstation so that I can only have one computer. But it didn't matter which device I picked up because Google Drive is where I stored every single file. And and my passwords were in one password. I didn't use any other place. It was in my password manager with my two-step verification integrated, so I don't get texts for two-step unless they don't have the other option. And I don't use Notes apps unless I'm at, when I was doing Business Accelerator, I would get the workbook. I would download the digital workbook because I like that, and I liked writing on that. And then when I was done, I exported that file to Google Drive. I don't want to have to organize a Notes app. I don't have to organize Evernote or any of these different places. And I take notes all the time. But I'm taking client notes. And where are those? In my clients folder, along with the contract and estimates and any other assets that I may have created or that client had sent to me. The notes stay there. When I'm doing strategic planning, that's in my operations folder, and that's where my notes are for that. When I'm doing a collaboration for someone else for some sort of marketing thing, I'm gonna work with someone else and we're gonna do a joint venture and do some LinkedIn Live together, and we're creating an outline. That goes in my partnerships in under marketing and partnerships, and there's a document for that outline. So I'm not taking notes in a ton of different places because I want those notes to live in context. And and so the less tools that I introduce, the more consistent my experience, and I always know where to go. Now, if I were to do, use a digital note-taking app, or usually I do paper. I got the iPad, I got the pencil and everything, and I just don't like it as much as I like paper. But I don't scan those sheets of paper. I look at that sheet of paper and I see, what is this? And I hand type those notes up in a document, because I may have just written a few words that needed a sentence or two. And I may have a whole bunch of notes that don't make sense and don't really matter in the end, and I just leave it out. And then I have a couple of action items that need to go into Asana, and I throw that sheet of paper away. So this way, I'm consistently using my file structure for everything that I really need to save. My action items go elsewhere. And then paper is just an anchoring tool for my nervous system to look at one blank sheet that I'm focusing on, and that I'm not exposed to anything else on my machine. Even if nothing else is open, just knowing it's a click away means I can, it opens up possibilities. That's why I like paper sometimes.
How do you, it's close to home, interestingly, for all of us, because we're diehard full focus planner people, business accelerator people, best full focus planner, by far the best planner
I
I've
like
ever
that
had.
olive one with the gold spirals.
The ring bound one. And so we use those. We also use Asana for, our big stuff, our projects, our OKRs and things. And I personally run into trouble with that. There are times I'm like, I'm just doing paper because it keeps me focused. And then there are other times I'm like, okay, my planner is sitting on my desk on the other side of the office and I'm in here right now and I need to know what. And then there are other times I'm like, I'm just doing Asana, forget it. And my EA loves that I, am just back and forth. She's organized, which is really helpful. But how do you, do you have a solution or a suggestion for the hybrid system like that?
It's going to be double work. Everything that's in my planner needs to go in Asana as well, unless it's just a quick thing to check off or whatever. And it's not that big of a deal to just write it in paper, and it doesn't need to be tracked elsewhere. But the majority of my work, it all goes into Asana, which, if you're listening and you don't know what Asana is, it's basically a sophisticated task manager. You can put a bunch of tasks in there and organize them by projects and stuff. So that's where the work really needs to live. And the paper is an anchoring. So if I'm going to sit down and do my daily sheet and big three and everything of planning my day, I'm looking at my digital calendar to tell me, and then I'm handwriting in the appointments that I have for the day and that are on my digital calendar in my paper planner. And I'm looking at the things that I have in Asana that I've listed as my big three for the week. And I'm putting that in. Are one of those or are all of those going to go on my daily sheet? Are there any other tasks that I need to put on here? Is there anything else that I need to remember? And it goes in there. So it's not that it's replacing the digital tool. It's that when I feel overwhelmed, I can look at this sheet of paper, and this is the one that I'm looking at to check, and I'm not having to open up another tool that may have a bunch of other tasks that I don't necessarily want to expose myself to. And it feels good to just check things off physically.
That's true.
So it is a little bit of double work, but it's something that's so rewarding, because if I can look at my digital calendar at the beginning of the day and say, oh yeah, I've got all of these meetings. and this is who I'm meeting with. And then I can start my first meeting and completely forget what else I'm doing throughout the day. But if I've sat down in the morning and I've physically written out what I'm planning on doing for the day, and I'm choosing what the big three is or the big one thing that I need to get done today is, it's totally different. It's a totally different experience that will stick with you much further or much longer than just doing it all digitally. We evolved from working in a physical space. Just because it's digital and it all feels magical now doesn't mean that your brain doesn't want something physical and want to actually write something out, because it's different than typing.
Yeah, that's true.
I agree. I prefer my planner. I actually have in the top, I have my 2 notes of things I know that I have to look at on the computer. Well, more than 2, but my first one, I have a reminder in the corner of my paper that says check Trainual first. And then I put check Asana, because if it like confuses my brain to go pull up my screen and everything, but on paper I can like focus. And you're right, there is a stronger feeling of accomplishment when you actually check it off, unless the little unicorn flies across the screen for Asana.
That's nice sometimes. the little unicorn.
I love the unicorn.
It's, when we organize things, our brain, our life, our calendar, our software, our files, any organization practice is going to restore parasympathetic dominance. In our nervous system, that is going to literally pump the brakes in the nervous system. And so just like mindfulness, just like breathing techniques, just like, exercising or laughing or reading or having oxytocin release by having lunch with a friend or coffee with your small group or whatever, those all kick the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, the break part that kicks that in, and organizing does that as well. And so a lot of times, I'm guilty of saying, I want everything in its place. I just don't have time. That's not a true statement, but I tell myself that a lot. That's the story I tell myself. And the truth is, if we would take the time and keep it organized, that actually will boost our productivity as well, which is not this big surprise, but
I procrastinate a lot.
What's that?
How about some tips on that? About staying organized.
Go for it.
So when half the battle for digital or any sort of organization is creating a space for it, right? So everyone here has created a folder structure on their computer in some way to be able to throw some files in to try and get organized. And so that's a great start to it. But then the other part is really thinking through all of the other little things of what are the habits or what are the little tweaks that we can change on our computer or on our phones to be able to make it easier. So a lot of this is actually creating shortcuts and just changing some settings. So one of the things that I like to do to have all of our clients do is to change your web browser preferences. So instead of it just downloading all of your files to the downloads folder or to your desktop automatically, it asks you where you want to download that file. So this way, if you've done the work of creating a new folder structure that accounts for finances, and that we've got taxes, and we may need to save different receipts and health records and other things like that. If we've created those folders, when we download that 1098, we're coming up on tax season here for the mortgage interest that you've paid throughout the year for your home. You know exactly where to store that, and you can name it appropriately right away. Because I find that the majority of people have less of a tolerance for doing kind of maintenance work, especially on the computer anymore, because we feel like it should just do it all for us.
Yep.
And I'm guilty of that too. I mean, I'm just as desensitized and spoiled as everyone else. That I find myself hating doing routine work. So how can we set it up so that things are really easy? So creating bookmarks to the things that we access most frequently, and even shortcuts on our computer. Now, when you're going through your file organization restructure, so I actually have a guide that I want to give you all. So if you go to thedigitalorganizer.com/YWC, so your weekly checkup, you can download a file organization guide. This is the steps that we take our clients through to get organized and in the most efficient way possible, which is consolidating everything together, purging it all out, so getting rid of the stuff you don't need, archiving the stuff that's really not relevant anymore. Then we get into reorganizing and then naming your files well. And you'll find that once you go through those first few steps, you don't have that much stuff to organize anymore. So then you can make these little tweaks that I'm talking about that make it so easy to download something and put it in the right spot the first time, especially if you're using Google Drive or Dropbox. You can just get a link and send those to other places and have it sync across all of your devices. So it's very easy. And then I give you a bunch of tools as well, or videos showing you how you can organize your email and get on top of this and stop the incoming tide of like tons and tons of marketing messages that you've unsubscribed from before, but it didn't work. I'll give you the secret of how to actually stay on top of that. So I just want to give all of that to you today if you want to go and download that stuff, because it will be so helpful.
Will you repeat that again for our listeners, and we'll make sure we post it in the show notes too?
Yeah, it's thedigitalorganizer.com/YWC. So your weekly checkup. That's what you're listening to right now. So check out that link and you can download the file organization guide, and I'll send you some emails on cleaning up your email so you can stay on top of this and get to inbox zero and stay there.
Very cool. I like it. What about people that have, I don't touch my email first. My EA gets my email, and then we have a 6-folder system from, who is it? Dan Martell, Buy Back Your Time. He talks about his email GPS system, and ours is pretty close to that. Do you have, so what about for people like that, or what about people with multiple email, right? So you've got your work and you've got your personal, and you've got the one for the foundation you serve on, and then you've got the, do you have solutions for those people?
Yeah, totally. I don't address it in the emails that I'll send with cleaning things up. Basically, the same principles apply across the board. So, I mean, for every account, I want to do cleanup first and slow down the marketing emails and really bring that to a stop so that you've only got emails from real people showing up in your inbox. And that's going to make a huge difference. And then from there, typically we're walking people through a process to figure out what do you need? Like, what is your particular situation? Do you have an assistant who can check this for you? In which case, like, what tools do they use? Are they on a PC or a Mac? And what are your needs? And then we can set them up with a workflow so that ideally they have a situation like you, where someone is checking their email for them, and anything that you need to personally reply to, then that can be shared with you with a context, and so that you can address that. But in the end, you're not being exposed to all of these requests that really it's not the best use of your time to be addressing. And so if somebody doesn't have that at all, we can take them from a complete nightmare to training an executive assistant on an entire workflow and setting that up custom for that person. We've done some wild stuff of, one person doesn't even check email at all. She just uses Microsoft Teams, and the assistant forwards messages into a Teams channel for her to reply to, so that she never even has to look at an email again.
That's
There's some wild stuff we can do. Yeah.
I love it. Well, Shawn, we are super grateful. Thank you for sharing that. And again, that link is thedigitalorganizer.com/YWC. We appreciate that. On behalf of our team in Ann Arbor and our awesome team at WMUZ, thank you for tuning in. This will replay Saturday evening, and then you can also get the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We'll look forward to being back next week, and thank you for joining us.
God bless.
Okay, guys, we're all set. We'll talk to you next week.